Leonardo Ortega was everything many could only dream of. Luxury cars, a dream mansion, and a bank account that seemed inexhaustible, even though he lived without restraint. As the head of one of the country's most powerful hotel chains, his name inspired admiration. But behind the glitter and success, Leonardo carried a deep sorrow, an ancient melancholy he carried since childhood. When he asked about his mother and no one knew what to tell him, or so they said, only Aunt Ramona, who had been like a second mother to him, insisted that his parents had died in an accident and that it was better not to reopen that painful past. One gray, overcast Friday, Leonardo decided to break the routine. He didn't want another meeting or glamorous event. He ordered his secretary to find a nursing home in real need of help for a genuine donation. That's how he arrived at 19 San Felipe Colony, an old shelter with cracked paint and the smell of dampness. When he stepped out of his SUV, the director greeted him, a small woman with dyed red hair, treating him like a public figure. The plan was simple: hand over a check, take a photo for corporate social media, and leave without drama. But upon entering, something shifted. The place felt heavy, sad, and an invisible force pulled Leonardo's soul inward. He walked down a long corridor, seeing elderly people in battered chairs, some asleep, others staring at the TV without comprehension. Then he saw her, seated in a wheelchair by a foggy window, a white-haired woman, wrinkled, but with a gaze that shook every fiber of his being. He didn't know why, but he couldn't stop staring. Something inside screamed that he knew her. With slightly trembling hand, he approached. The lady lifted her gaze as if responding to a silent summons. The director quickly explained that her name was Carmen, that she'd been there for decades, with no registered family and few words. Leonardo inquired about her history and learned that the old files had been lost in a flood. Without knowing why, he knelt before Carmen. She raised her trembling hand and touched his cheek. She murmured something barely audible. He believed it was his name. The world tilted. Nothing mattered anymore but that woman. Without photos or fanfare, he handed over cash so nothing would be lacking that week, refusing to be photographed. He only wanted to know who Carmen was. He asked if he could return, and though the director assumed it was just another superficial charity gesture, she agreed. In his SUV, palms perspiring, he felt the deepest fear. Fear of discovering his perfect life was built on old lies. He drove away from the shelter, unable to stop looking at his reflection in the rear-view mirror. That night, he couldn't sleep. Only Carmen's face floated behind his eyelids. He had always been a practical man, but felt a hollow in his chest he couldn't fill. He roamed his house in silence, unable to distract himself. Even social media felt alien. Something inside commanded. Carmen was not a stranger. In the morning, he returned to the nursing home unannounced. Carmen was in the same chair by the window. When she saw him, she lifted her head decisively, fixing her gaze on him. Leonardo knelt and spoke softly, asking if she remembered anything. She said nothing, but her eyes and trembling hand touched him once more. It felt like a blurred childhood memory, a look, a caress he believed he'd lived before. They sat under a tree outside near the garden. Suddenly, she squeezed his hand and whispered Leo. Leo, his family-only nickname, not even the staff knew it. Leonardo's heart leapt. They lingered, ignoring visiting hours. He took a photo, with her permission, not to display, but to keep that moment. Carmen looked at him as if a trace of recognition pierced through her years of oblivion. He whispered he would return, that she was not alone. He left with a broken soul, got into his SUV, and with the keys in hand, knew he had uncovered the full truth about that woman. Back in his penthouse, he searched through old boxes, letters, drawings, photos. He found a yellowed photograph of him as a baby in the arms of a woman. It wasn't Ramona. On the back, hastily written, Carmen and Leo my whole life. Pure emotion, too strong to be coincidence. He shattered internal silences. Ramona might not be the heroine he always believed. Doubt poisoned him. He called Detective Mario Sanian and arranged a meeting the next day at a cafe. He laid the photo on the table. Mario asked for details to investigate. After several days, Mario returned with news. The supposed accident that killed his parents had occurred, but the medical report indicated his mother survived. She was taken to a rural hospital and, a few days later, collected by a woman identified as Leonardo Ortega, who took her from the hospital and admitted her to that same nursing home, his aunt who had raised him. When Leonardo learned that the blow in his chest was brutal, Ramona had deceived him his entire life. Even worse, upon waking from the coma, his mother repeatedly said Leo. That explained everything. The touch of her hand, that intimate whisper. It wasn't madness. It was memory shattered, trying to piece itself back together. He carefully stored the files. He knew confronting Ramona directly without stronger proof would be a mistake. He needed time to study and plan. In his old home, in his office, he discovered a hidden compartment in the bookshelf. Inside, a safe with personal and important documents, investments, insurance, perhaps answers. It felt like pieces of a puzzle beginning to fit together. And though this was only the beginning, his purpose crystallized. He would uncover the truth. Above all, he would confront Ramona until the full truth emerged. He examined each manila envelope. Most were legal documents, deeds, investments, nothing surprising. But near the bottom, he found a thinner envelope with his name written in crooked letters. Leonardo. Hands trembling, he opened it. Inside lay old papers, childhood drawings, letters signed by Carmen. Few, but enough to prove she had loved him and had searched for him. Some addressed my little Leo. Speaking of birthdays, songs she sang to him as a baby, and how she dreamed of hugging him again one day. The dates ranged over many years, some from his childhood, some more recent, all wrinkled and unsealed, as though never sent. Confessions frozen in time. Carmen's trembling handwriting cried from the page. Leonardo clenched his teeth. This was now more than pain, it was fury. Ramona had possession of those letters all along. She knew Carmen was alive, and she kept her hidden. The silence in the house was overwhelming. Only paper crinkled as he folded it carefully. He gathered everything into a briefcase, locked the office door, and left without looking back. This time he would not leave with questions. This time he would face the truth head-on. He drove to Ramona's house, the same house where he spent his childhood, the one where she raised him with made-up stories and half-truths. He knocked the door firmly. Ramona opened, hair pinned back, an old robe, smiling as though expecting him for Sunday dinner. But her smile faded when she saw his eyes. "I need to talk to you," he said without greeting. She hesitated a moment but stepped aside to let him in, sensing this was no ordinary visit. They sat in the dining room, face to face. Leonardo didn't mince words. "Where's my mother?" he demanded in a low, measured voice, as if each word weighed tons. Ramona narrowed her eyes and crossed her arms. "Leonardo, we've talked about this many times. Your parents died." "No," he interrupted, slamming the table with an open palm. "Don't lie to me. I was with her. I saw her. She called me Leo. I have her letters. I have documents. I know you took her from the hospital. I know you put her in that asylum." Ramona went pale. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she looked down. The silence lasted, so long you could hear the old wall clock tick. Finally, she spoke in a barely audible whisper. She wasn't well, Leonardo. After the accident, she didn't remember anything. She didn't know who she was, or who you were. No one wanted to take responsibility. Doctors said it was best to admit her. And you were a child. You needed a stable life. "And so you stole hers?" he said, voice thick with tears, leaning forward. "You had no right to bury her alive?" Ramona didn't answer. She just remained there, swallowed by her own silence. Leonardo felt he couldn't breathe. He wanted to say more, to shout more, but the words weren't enough. He grabbed the briefcase with the evidence and left, leaving the door open behind him. He didn't want explanations, only to restore his mother's identity. Days later, Leonardo returned to the nursing home with a team of lawyers and a private doctor. He wanted an evaluation for Carmen, not as another figure in the system, but as she was his mother. The results were sobering. Carmen had irreversible cognitive damage, but retained emotional fragments. She recognized faces, gestures, smells, and above all, she recognized Leonardo. The Millionaire had a section of the nursing home completely remodeled just for her. He hired top caregivers, played the vintage music his mother loved, brought fresh flowers every day. He spent hours reading to her, telling stories of his life, his achievements, his childhood. He didn't know how much he understood, but he knew his presence brought her peace. Over time, their bond deepened. Carmen never fully recovered her memory, but each time he arrived, she smiled with the same tenderness from that first day. She touched him with her trembling hand and whispered his nickname, as though that fragment of memory had never faded. 1 month later, Leonardo appeared on television, but not to talk about his hotels or his millions. He shared his mother's story, the abandonment, the deception, the reunion, not as a victim, but to spark conversation about the forgotten, the elderly with no voice, silenced memories. The country was moved. Thousands began visiting nursing homes. Some sought lost relatives. Others just listened to those no one visited. Leonardo never sought fame, but he became a symbol of something larger, the son who returned to rescue his mother from oblivion. Every time he entered the nursing home, Carmen looked at him with those wide, clouded eyes. Even though words eluded her, there was something in her gaze that embraced him more powerfully than any voice. Because sometimes love survives silence, years, lies. Sometimes love simply waits. And Leonardo had found it just when he stopped searching. Then he found one particularly wrinkled folder, stained with damp and bearing a single word on its cover: personal. When he opened it, he felt the world crumble beneath him. Inside was a copy of his mother's death certificate. But something didn't add up. The date didn't match what Mario had told him. According to this document, his mother had died a year before the car accident. That was impossible. The certificate was a forgery. Next to it was a power of attorney naming Ramona as sole legal guardian and administrator of all Ortega family assets, declaring no living heirs. There were also old bank statements showing large transfers made shortly after the accident, all seemingly legal, but built on a lie, that his parents died leaving no descendants. Fury erupted in him like lava. Ramona had orchestrated it all. She took advantage of the accident, his mother's amnesia, and her own image as protective aunt to claim a fortune that wasn't hers. But beyond money or property, she stole his life. She robbed him of growing up with his true mother. Among the papers, he found a letter from Carmen, not addressed to anyone in particular, more like a catharsis. In it, his mother expressed a bad feeling before the trip, said Ramona had changed, that she no longer trusted her, but had no proof to confront the situation. Leonardo shuddered reading it. It was as if Carmen spoke to him from the past, warning him. He placed all the documents back in the manila envelope and into his backpack. He locked the safe and left the office just as he found it. Though no one could hear him, his steps felt heavy. When he got into his SUV, his blood boiled, but it wasn't impulsive rage. It was serene, sharp fury. He wasn't going to create a scene. He would wield those papers as a sword. He would make Ramona speak, confess. He looked at himself in the rearview mirror. The face that stared back was no longer the gentle man who came to the shelter out of compassion. He was someone else now, a man bent on justice. He started the engine and drove directly to Ramona's house. She lived in an elegant residence with lush gardens and tall trees. He parked right in front. He switched off the engine and sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, breathing deeply. Then he took the envelope and got out. He pressed the doorbell. No answer. He knocked firmly. Finally, he heard footsteps and the door opened. Ramona appeared impeccable as ever, wearing an expensive dress, a pearl necklace, and that rehearsed smile she'd shown him all his life. "Leo, what a surprise," she said sweetly. "So early here." Leonardo didn't reply. He merely lifted the envelope. "We need to talk." Ramona tensed for a moment, but masked it, letting him in. The house, always pristine, now felt like an empty stage. They sat in the living room, across from one another. Leonardo wasted no time. He placed a forged certificate on the table. "What is this, Ramona?" She looked away briefly, then raised her head with her usual smile. "I don't know what you're talking about." Leonardo laughed shortly, coldly. "Don't pretend. You know exactly what I mean. You signed papers so everyone would believe my mother was dead, and she wasn't." Ramona crossed her legs deliberately. "You were a baby, Leonardo. You don't know everything that happened. It was chaos. I did what I thought was best to protect you. And so, keep my mother in a forgotten asylum while you took everything for yourself. That was protection?" For the first time, Ramona's smile faltered. "Not completely, but just enough. Your mother wasn't well. She didn't remember anything. She was a risk to you, to everyone." Leonardo leaned in. "And you erased her from existence, as if she were disposable." Ramona clicked her tongue, annoyed. "I raised you. I gave you everything. You can't judge me now that you're an adult. Survival decisions aren't always black or white." Leonardo shook his head. "You had no right. None." Then she dropped the mask. Her friendly expression turned cold. "You're right. I didn't. But had I not acted, that woman would have dragged you into her madness. None of what you have would exist if I hadn't intervened." Leonardo recoiled, as if truth had struck him full on. "What I have? I was a child. I built nothing." Ramona smiled again, but this time her smile carried venom. "I was the one who held it all together while you grew like a king. You owe me your place in this world." Leonardo stood, exhausted. "None of that justifies what you did. What you gave me can't compare to what you took." Ramona also rose, smoothing her dress. "And what do you plan to do? Destroy me over an old woman who doesn't even know who you are?" Leonardo looked at her with deep sadness. "I'm not alone. My mother is my true family, and I will fight to the end to restore her name, her story, her life." Ramona stayed silent, motionless as he walked away. Leonardo closed the door firmly behind him and left that house knowing nothing would ever be the same. But for the first time in a long time, he felt he was heading in the right direction. Leonardo clenched his jaw. He knew that if he delayed, Ramona could start moving her pieces, erase evidence, close accounts, manipulate witnesses. He had to act fast. "Can you keep investigating?" he asked, sliding his personal card onto the desk. Mario took it without hesitation. "Of course, but this isn't a small matter anymore. We're stepping on powerful toes, and Ramona knows how to defend what she's stolen." Leonardo looked at him firmly. "Do whatever it takes. I don't care how much it costs. I want every document, every witness, every trap she left behind." They shook hands. A silent pact. A point of no return. That same night, Leonardo returned to his apartment. He wasn't about to waste a second. He locked himself in his study, turned off his phone, and spread out all the documents he had gathered. Forged records, suspicious transfers, manipulated certificates. Every sheet was an open wound, one more betrayal. To the side, he placed a special folder he had never opened. It had been handed to him by his father's lawyer on his 30th birthday, with strict instructions. Only open it when you're ready to carry the truth. Tonight, he opened it with tense hands. The first thing inside was a handwritten letter from his father. "Leonardo, if you're reading this, it's because you're now a man. Never forget your roots, and never let power cloud your sense of justice." Leonardo felt his throat tighten. He kept reading, line by line. Inside that folder were the deeds to all the family properties, joint accounts with his mother, and a notarized will. Everything was left first to Carmen and his wife, and only in the event of her death, to Leonardo. There was no mention of Ramona, not a single word, not a single cent, among the documents. He also found a typed letter from the family's trusted attorney, explaining that if both parents died, a trust fund should be opened in Leonardo's name. But that trust was never created. Ramona had blocked everything, forging Carmen's death and taking full control. Leonardo took a deep breath. Every line confirmed it. His entire life had been built on a lie. He picked up the phone and called Mario. "I need a lawyer, someone who can play hardball if necessary." "I've got just the one," Mario replied without pause. "Ricardo Torres. Young, sharp, and fearless with dirty cases." "Perfect," Leonardo said before hanging up. He didn't sleep that night. He organized everything, made copies, sorted files, and prepped the case like he was taking it to the Supreme Court. At dawn, he suited up, grabbed the documents, and headed to a notary. He had every page certified, making sure they would hold up in court. As he left, Mario messaged him with Ricardo's address. The firm was located in a sleek, modern building in the financial district. Leonardo arrived on time. Mario was already in the lobby and led him silently to the office. Ricardo greeted him with a calm but penetrating gaze. He shook Leonardo's hand firmly and gestured for him to sit. Leonardo laid all the files on the desk. For nearly an hour, Ricardo reviewed everything in silence, occasionally jotting notes, frowning, nodding. When he finished, he looked up. "We have enough here to open a criminal case. Fraud, forgery, breach of trust, concealment. Your aunt could face serious prison time." Leonardo nodded, emotionless. "What do I need to do?" "Get witnesses," Ricardo said firmly. "People who can confirm your mother was alive after her supposed death, and that Ramona manipulated everything. We also need certified copies of every original document, letters, contracts, bank statements." Mario chimed in. "I've already located a nurse from the care home and a former hospital employee. Both remember key details. If we get their testimony, the case becomes airtight." Ricardo nodded in approval. "That gives us a strong edge, but don't let your guard down. This could get dirtier than you think." Leonardo knew it, and he knew what he had to do. "There's one place I have to check," he said, standing. "My father's old office. I haven't been back since the accident, but there might be more documents there." Mario offered to join, but Leonardo shook his head. "This is something I have to do alone." Without another word, he drove toward the family ranch, the place where his childhood had stopped. Dust, memories, and secrets were waiting for him. The woman, the nurse, bore no grudge, but she didn't want complications either. Still, if offered fair compensation and guaranteed protection, she was willing to testify. Leonardo stood up, pacing the office as if negotiating a multi-million-dollar deal. "We need more," he said with steel in his voice. "Not just scattered testimonies. Something that completely breaks her. Solid proof." Mario smirked, pulling out a copy of an old bank record. "That's why I called you. After your mother was admitted to the care home, Ramona closed a joint account your parents shared and transferred the funds to a personal account in Panama through a lawyer who now works as her legal advisor. Do you have his name?" Leonardo asked, eyes locked on him. "Esteban Ordóñez. A shark." Leonardo realized time was against him. If Ramona, since they were closing in, she'd destroy everything. "Can you keep digging?" "Of course, but this is no small task. We'll need more hands." Ramona's a pro at covering her tracks. Leonardo handed him a business card. "Do whatever it takes. Dig up every stone she's hiding behind." Mario pocketed the card and shook his hand. "Brace yourself. This is just the beginning." That night, Leonardo didn't sit still. He returned home, not to rest, but to work. He locked himself in his study, turned off his phone, and laid out all the gathered documents. Fake death certificates, suspicious transfers, property deeds. He opened a folder he'd received years ago, one that had been collecting dust. Inside was a letter from his father. "Leo, if you ever doubt who you are or where you come from, you'll find the truth here. Your mother and I love you more than anything. If you're reading this, something must have happened to us. Don't blindly trust anyone. Not even family is free from failing. Trust your heart. Dad." A lump formed in Leonardo's throat. He carefully stored all the documents in his backpack, locked the safe, and left the study. He now had everything he needed to prove Ramona had built her life on a fortress of lies. But the biggest challenge still lay ahead, getting his mother out of that care home and giving her, even if just a fragment, the life she had been robbed of. Without wasting a moment, he returned to the city and met with Ricardo and Mario. He handed over all the original documents from the ranch. Though his heart swelled with emotion, he also felt a tension in his chest, a dark premonition that the worst was yet to come. Ricardo calmly reviewed the files and finalized the case file. They had it all: witnesses, originals, bank records, the real will, and his father's personal letter. "We're ready," Ricardo declared, closing the folder with resolve. Leonardo nodded. It was time to face Ramona. They summoned her to Ricardo's office. It wasn't easy. Ramona ignored calls and emails. She vanished for a few days, but Mario, an expert at tracking people down, found her. They spotted her leaving a luxury spa, then entering a house in an exclusive neighborhood Leonardo hadn't even known existed. The pressure worked. Ramona agreed to a meeting, but with conditions: no cameras, no recordings, only a civilized conversation, as she called it. Leonardo arrived first at the office, flanked by Ricardo and Mario. He couldn't afford mistakes. When Ramona walked in, she was impeccable. A pearl-colored suit, flawless makeup, and that manipulative smile she used to control everyone. But her eyes gave her away. Not fear, not pride, just fury. Leonardo didn't hesitate. "It's sad you come to this after everything I did for you." He didn't take the bait. Ricardo opened the folder and spoke firmly. "Ms. Ramona, we have clear evidence of fraud, document forgery, and theft of both assets and the freedom of Mrs. Carmen, Leonardo's mother and rightful heir." Ramona let out a dry, mocking laugh. "Evidence? Please, just old papers. Nothing a decent lawyer can't dismantle in court." Leonardo looked at her, his expression a storm of sadness and rage. "I don't want a trial. I just want you to return what isn't yours, clear my mother's name, and face what you've done." Ramona scoffed. "You really think you can destroy me after all the power I've accumulated? It won't be that easy, Leo." Ricardo slid copies of bank transfers across the table. "This is money laundering, ma'am. Transfers to offshore accounts. The tax authorities and the DA's office already have plenty of reasons to open a full investigation." She flipped through the pages without blinking. "There's nothing solid. A letter, an old will, unreliable witnesses. I'm not scared." Leonardo took a deep breath. "What if my mother is still alive, recognizes you, and even whispers my name? That tremble in your lip, it was the first crack in your mask." Ramona recovered quickly. "Your mother is insane. Who would believe a senile old woman who can't even remember her own name?" Mario smiled coldly. "She doesn't need to remember everything. We have medical records showing that after the accident, she was alive and lucid, and that you institutionalized her without legal guardianship." Ramona clenched her jaw. The predator cornered. "So, what do you want, Leonardo? To humiliate me? Send me to prison? Destroy me publicly?" Leonardo didn't blink. "I want justice. For my mother to get back what's hers. And for the whole country to know who you really are." Ramona shot up, nearly knocking over her chair. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I have power. I won't surrender." Ricardo calmly adjusted his glasses. "Threats won't work anymore. You have two choices: settle or face a legal battle you can't control." Ramona glared at them, then turned to Leonardo. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life." He held her gaze, unflinching. "My biggest mistake was trusting you. I won't make it again." Ramona grabbed her purse, slapped the folder off the table, and stormed out, slamming the door behind her like a thunderclap. Leonardo dropped into the chair, the weight of years of lies crashing down on him. Ricardo looked at him gravely. "She's going to fight with everything she's got. Prepare for a dirty war." Leonardo clenched his fists. He was ready for it. He wasn't going to wait any longer. He knew Carmen was a key. Fragile, yes, but the living proof of everything that had happened. He would not allow her to remain hidden in that care facility one more day. That same afternoon, he drove straight to the place. No notice, no permission. He pushed open the rusted gate and walked in. The director, the same bottle blonde woman who had received him before, tried to block his path. "Mr. Ortega, visits must be scheduled." Leonardo cut her off. "I'm not here to visit. I'm here to take my mother home." The director fell silent, trailing him nervously down the hallway. He found Carmen in the same spot, by a dirty window, staring blankly into space. But something had changed. She blinked when she saw him, as if something inside had stirred. Leonardo knelt before her and gently took her trembling hands. "Mom, you're not alone anymore. I'm taking you with me." Carmen looked at him. She said nothing, but tears welled up in her eyes. Leonardo felt his heart break into 1,000 shards. Without asking for anyone's permission, he called the private doctor he had hired. Less than an hour later, Carmen was transferred to a modern clinic. Clean, warm, with real doctors who actually cared. A new chapter had begun. Tests, scans, evaluations. The diagnosis, moderate cognitive impairment, but with a real chance of partial recovery, if treated properly. Leonardo didn't hesitate. He didn't care about the cost. If there was even the faintest hope of saving a part of his mother, he would fight for it. The days were heavy. Carmen would forget, get frightened, drift into herself. But Leonardo stayed by her side, never leaving. He accompanied her to every therapy session, read to her, spoke to her as if she understood every single word. One morning, in the clinic's garden, Carmen suddenly gripped his hand tightly. "Leo," she whispered, barely audible. Leonardo leaned in closer, not letting go. "I'm here, Mom. You're safe. Everything's going to be okay." She looked at him, and for the first time, there was light in her eyes. Something was awakening. "My baby," she said, her voice fragile but clear. Leonardo felt his breath hitch. He held her in a desperate, trembling embrace, like trying to protect her from all the lost years, from all the silence, from every stolen moment. Carmen's tears soaked into his gray sweater, without a sound. It was the first real breakthrough. The doctors were surprised. She was beginning to recognize faces, form words, show emotion. Leonardo stayed close. Always, he brought childhood photos, lullabies she once sang to him, familiar scents that might awaken old memories. Little by little, Carmen improved. It wasn't a miracle, it was effort, tenacity. Every smile, every word, every glance was a victory. One afternoon, as they sat under the garden tree, Carmen once again took his hand. "My house?" she asked, her voice trembling. Leonardo blinked in surprise. "You want to go home, Mama?" She nodded slowly. He felt tears rise again, but held them back. He caressed her hand and whispered promise. They would have a home, not the house of lies where pain had been buried, but a new space, clean and true, where dignity and peace would return. He understood now. Even if her mind didn't remember everything, her heart still knew exactly where it belonged. The next step would be taking her out of the clinic, giving her a real home, and continuing her recovery. But he couldn't let his guard down. Ramona was still out there, and she wouldn't go down without a fight. Leonardo clenched his jaw, looking at his mother. Fragile, yes, but brave. The real war was just beginning. That Sunday, the sky looked confused, torn between clearing up or bursting into rain. Leonardo followed his routine and took Carmen to the patio for some sun and quiet time. They sat beneath a tree, wrapped in a blanket against the wind. Leonardo spoke softly, describing the trees, the cars passing by, anything that might trigger a reaction. Sometimes Carmen smiled faintly. Other times, she simply stared into distance. But that day, something shifted. He showed her an old photo of himself as a child, riding a toy horse. She furrowed her brow, like a forgotten door creaked open. Leonardo leaned in. "Do you remember, Mom?" Her trembling hand reached out and touched the photo like it was made of gold. She mumbled something, barely a whisper. "Las Palmas." Leonardo froze. "What?" She repeated just a little louder. "Las Palmas." A chill ran down Leonardo's spine. He didn't recognize the name, but for Carmen, it was a beacon in the dark. He pulled out his phone and searched. Hacienda Las Palmas. A forgotten estate on the outskirts of the state, abandoned for years, and registered under the Ortega family name. And now we're left with more questions and answers. If you discovered your life was built on lies, what would you do? Would you chase the truth, even if it destroyed everything you thought you knew? Or would you protect the illusion just to feel safe? Let us know in the comments. Your voice might be the next story we tell. His father had bought that place before the accident, dreaming of a refuge far from the city. Leonardo had never been there. His Aunt Ramona always said it was dangerous and not worth a trip. Now he understood why they never took him. He looked at Carmen, who was watching him with a mixture of sadness and hope. "Do you want us to go?" he asked, gently caressing her hand. She nodded weakly. He knew he couldn't take her yet. She was far too fragile. But he could go. He promised her he would, that he'd search for the truth hidden there. When Carmen fell asleep beneath the tree, Leonardo knew he couldn't waste a second more. That afternoon, he met with Mario and told him everything. The detective lit up with the same urgency. If Carmen remembered that place, it was because something important had happened there. "We have to go," Mario said without hesitation. The next morning, they met at a mechanic's garage. Mario had secured an off-road truck, ready for difficult terrain, ready to drive to the end of the world. Mario joked, though his tone was serious. Leonardo gave a humorless smile, ready for anything. They took off. The scenery changed quickly, from paved streets to gravel roads, then to narrow trails surrounded by dry, thorny brush. The heat intensified. Dust seeped through the windows, and every bump in the road jolted the vehicle. But they didn't stop. After nearly 4 hours, the hacienda appeared before them. In the middle of nowhere, the massive stone structure, covered in ivy and weeds, looked like a ghost from the past. Leonardo stepped out of the truck, his stomach in a knot. He could feel it. He was about to uncover something big, something that would change everything. The truck came to stop in front of a rotting wooden gate, barely hanging on to a rusted hinge. The air smelled of dry earth and abandonment. The hacienda didn't welcome them. It challenged them to enter. Mario pulled out a flashlight, despite it still being daylight. Something about the place felt off. They pushed open the gate, which groaned loudly, scaring off nearby birds. They walked slowly across a courtyard overrun with weeds, puddles, and scattered stones. Every step raised a cloud of dust. They reached the main door, solid wood, barely holding together. Leonardo pushed hard, and the door flung open, releasing a cloud of dust that made them both cough. Inside, the air was even heavier. Beams of light pierced through holes in the broken ceiling. Old furniture stood under filthy sheets. Crooked paintings lined the walls. Shards of glass covered the floor. "You sure you want to keep going?" Mario asked, uneasy. Leonardo nodded, firm. "There's something here. I can feel it." They began exploring the house, passing through a wide sitting room and a long dining room where broken plates still lay on the table, as if someone had left in a hurry and never returned. Finally, they reached what looked like an old, abandoned library. The place was chaos. Books strewn across the floor, yellowed paper scattered without order. Leonardo moved carefully, taking it all in with a mix of nostalgia and determination. Then, from a shadowy corner, Mario called out in a low, urgent voice, "Take a look at this." Leonardo walked over, curious and alert. Mario had found a trapdoor, half hidden beneath a torn, dust-covered rug. They looked at each other. No words were needed. They both knew this discovery could change everything. Leonardo grabbed the edge of the trapdoor with steady hands and pulled hard. The wood creaked ominously, but gave way. Beneath them, a staircase descended into a cold, dark basement. As they stepped down, a chill enveloped them, accompanied by the unmistakable smell of damp stone and abandonment. The space was wide, filled with boxes coated in dust, shelves on the verge of collapse, and furniture wrapped in torn plastic. Leonardo headed straight to one of the largest boxes, carefully opened the lid, and found a forgotten treasure. Old photo albums, yellow documents, papers that seemed to contain fragments of a past someone had tried to bury. Among the photos, he saw his father, young and smiling, his mother radiant at a party, himself as a baby, all of it tucked away in a chest of memories abandoned by collective memory. But there was something else. At the bottom of the box, a blue folder sealed with yellow tape caught his eye. He tore it open carefully, pulling out the documents with trembling hands. It was a medical report on his mother, dated just days after the accident that had changed their lives. Among the pages, a handwritten note stood out. Patient transferred at the request of family member Ramona Ortega. No diagnosis of permanent incapacity, only partial memory loss. Psychological treatment recommended. Institutionalization not advised. Leonardo felt a tight knot form in his chest. His mother wasn't insane, as Ramona had tried to make everyone believe. She had simply lost part of her memory. And yet, knowing this, Ramona had locked her away in a care home to keep her hidden from the world and from him. "This is what we needed," he whispered, showing the document to Mario. The detective read it carefully, then clicked his tongue, furious. With this, Ramona won't be able to run anymore. As Leonardo tucked the folder into his backpack, something else caught his eye in the corner of the basement, almost hidden behind debris and broken furniture. A small door, probably meant for tools, barely visible. Leonardo walked over and opened it slowly. His flashlight lit up a tiny, nearly empty space, except for one object, a rusted car chassis, crushed by the weight of time. It was his parents' car. Mario stepped closer, stunned. "What the hell is this doing here?" he asked. Leonardo couldn't believe what he was seeing. All his life, they had told him the car had been destroyed in the crash and sent to a junkyard. Yet here it was, hidden in the basement of the old hacienda. He stepped closer and saw something that sent chills down his spine. On the passenger seat, untouched and half buried in dirt, was a small silver pendant in the shape of a heart, engraved with the initials C and J. Carmen and Joaquin, his parents. He clutched the pendant tightly, as if the object could give him the answers he so desperately needed. "Something happened here," he whispered. "Something Ramona tried to bury." Mario nodded. "And now she won't be able to hide it anymore." With his heart pounding, Leonardo tucked the pendant into his pocket, zipped up the backpack, and gave the abandoned car one last look. He knew he had just uncovered a key piece of the truth, and he also knew the danger had only just begun. Ramona wouldn't give up without a fight, and neither would he. By the time they left the hacienda, the sun was already setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple as the wind kicked up clouds of dust. They climbed back into the truck in silence, each lost in thought. Then Mario broke the silence with a grave voice. We're still missing something. We've got evidence, but we need a witness. Someone who can tell the story of what really happened at Hacienda Las Palmas. Leonardo nodded, understanding the weight of that missing piece. You think someone saw something? Mario let out a dry chuckle. In small towns, everyone knows everything. There's always someone who saw, who heard, who remembers. We just have to find them. Without wasting any time, they drove to the nearest town, a quiet place with cobblestone streets and humble homes, where people watched them with suspicion. Outside a small corner store, Mario walked in first with the confidence of someone who knows how to read people. Leonardo followed. Inside, an older woman with wrinkled hands and a face weathered by years of hard work eyed them warily. Good afternoon, ma'am. Mario greeted her with a kind smile. We're looking for someone who used to work at Hacienda Las Palmas years ago. We're from the Ortega family. The woman studied them, sharp and cautious. Why do you want to know? She asked with a rough voice. Leonardo stepped forward. It's important. My mom went through something very painful, and we think someone out there can help us understand what really happened. After a long pause, the woman stood up and led them into a small room filled with old photographs. She pointed to one in particular, a group of smiling men standing in front of the hacienda. That's my husband, Rogelio, she said. He was the foreman until everything shut down suddenly. Leonardo's heart raced. Is he still alive? She nodded with sadness. Yes, but he's sick. Hardly leaves his bed. He doesn't talk much anymore. Leonardo didn't hesitate. We'd like to see him. They walked to a humble house at the end of the street, where a young woman greeted them with the same guarded look. The home smelled of dampness and time standing still. In a bed by the window lay Rogelio, thin, frail, worn down by age and years under the sun. Leonardo approached slowly. Mr. Rogelio, I'm Leonardo Ortega. I've come to ask you about Hacienda Las Palmas, about what happened 40 years ago. Rogelio opened his eyes with difficulty, looking at them with a mixture of curiosity and resignation. Ortega, that name carries weight, boy. Leonardo leaned closer. My mom, Carmen, remembers you. The old man sighed. Of course I remember her. She was good people, always smiling. In a rough voice, Rogelio recounted what he had seen that day. The nervous arrival of Ramona in a half-destroyed car, the confusion of Carmen, alive but lost, calling for her son, Ramona's order to keep quiet, and the silent kidnapping of his mother, without papers or notice. Leonardo clenched his fists, controlling the rage threatening to explode. Are you willing to testify? Rogelio smiled sadly. If I can help bring justice, I will, not for you, but for her. With Rogelio's testimony, the documents, and the power of truth on his side, Leonardo felt Ramona's time was running out. But he knew the battle was far from over. It was a new beginning. They left the courthouse wrapped in a silence that felt like a contained celebration. Ricardo and Mario barely smiled, aware of the powerful blow they had just dealt. Leonardo walked alongside them with firm steps, but inside, he felt a huge weight lift from his shoulders, as if he could finally breathe without the burden of so many years crushing his chest. But the calm didn't last long. Just as Leonardo was about to get into his truck, the phone rang. An unknown number appeared on the screen, and without hesitation, he answered. On the other end, the voice was cold, dry like a shot. Leonardo Ortega, who's this? Someone with information you need to know, the caller replied. Leonardo gripped the phone tightly. I'm not in the mood for games. It's not a game, the voice said. It's about your father, the real one. Leonardo's heart stopped for a moment. The voice continued, as if dropping a bombshell. Ramona didn't lie entirely. Joaquin Ortega is not your biological father. The real one could change your life more than you imagine. Before he could respond, the call abruptly ended. Leonardo stared at the phone, waiting for it to ring again, but only silence remained. Mario, watching from the passenger door, immediately noticed the worry on his face. What's wrong? Leonardo took a deep breath. Someone says they have information about my real father. Mario frowned. Do you think it's true? Leonardo put the phone in his pocket, unable to answer. I don't know what to believe anymore, but I have to find out. That night, alone in his apartment, Leonardo couldn't sleep. He sat by the window overlooking the lit-up city, thinking about everything he had been through these past months. His mother, his broken childhood, and now the threat Ramona had thrown as a last resort. At dawn, determined not to stay paralyzed, he called Ricardo. He asked him to discreetly investigate everything possible about his mother before the accident. Friends, documents, any clue that could shed light on the truth Ramona had hidden. 2 days later, Ricardo arrived holding an envelope. Leonardo opened it without a word. Inside were copies of birth certificates, photographs, letters, and a story that chilled his blood. Before marrying Joaquin Ortega, Carmen had a relationship with another man, powerful, influential, a member of family that pulled strings in politics, business, and power. A man whose shadow stretched far beyond what Leonardo could imagine. The name appeared boldly: Guillermo Santa Cruz, a feared and respected businessman, owner of media chains, construction companies, mines, a titan whose presence in history was impossible to ignore. According to the documents, Carmen and Guillermo had a serious relationship, but family pressures tore them apart. Shortly after, Carmen met Joaquin, who accepted her pregnancy and raised Leonardo as his own son. Leonardo was the biological son of Guillermo Santa Cruz. He didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or run away. Ricardo watched him silently, waiting for him to absorb the truth. What does this mean? Leonardo finally asked. That your real father doesn't even know you exist, Ricardo answered. Or if he does, he's kept it a secret all these years. Leonardo rested his forehead in his hands, feeling everything he thought he knew about himself crumble like sand slipping through his fingers. Did Ramona know? He asked suddenly. Ricardo nodded. All signs point to yes. She probably had this card up her sleeve from the start, which is why she dared to do what she did. She knew that if she lost, she could use this truth to threaten you. Leonardo let out a bitter laugh. Even in her fall, she wanted to poison everything. He fell silent, gazing at the city below. His life would never be the same, not only because of Ramona's betrayal, nor just a fight to reclaim his mother, but because now he understood that part of his blood came from a man who never cared for him, someone who might never acknowledge him. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to sort his thoughts. He didn't know if he wanted to meet Guillermo Santa Cruz, or if he was ready to open that door. But one thing was clear. His true family was Carmen. She, broken and forgotten, yet always loving him. And that was all that truly mattered. The days after the trial were a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. Leonardo felt as if he had run a marathon from which he was only now catching his breath. The media noise slowly faded away. Newspapers, social media, the news, all lost interest when they realized it wasn't a scandal of luxury or a superficial fight. It was the story of a man fighting for his mother. Leonardo avoided cameras, interviews, and fame. He just wanted his life back. The first step was to get Carmen out of the clinic. Not because the care was bad, but because she had asked for it, with silent looks and gestures that he understood perfectly. She wanted a real home. He found a quiet house on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by trees, and with a garden where his mother could spend afternoons under the sun. He bought it without hesitation. He filled it with comfortable furniture, childhood photos, soft music, and familiar scents for her. The moving day was a small victory. Carmen didn't understand everything, but her shy smile when she saw the garden and flowers was enough for Leonardo. It was worth every sleepless night, every fight, every tear. He hired specialized nurses, but he remained her constant companion, reading her the newspaper, telling her about his day, sharing memories. Sometimes Carmen responded with scattered words, smiles, or a gentle touch. Simple moments, but for Leonardo, the most precious in the world. The mystery of Guillermo Santa Cruz lingered in the air. Ricardo had discreetly managed to get close to him, but Leonardo wasn't ready yet. He knew that one day he would want no more, to discover the man who gave him life, even if he never gave him a hug, advice, or even his name. But for now, his priority was different. Being with his mother, living the present. One afternoon, while watering the plants in the garden, Carmen looked at him for a long time. Leonardo approached and gently asked, "What's wrong, Mom?" She took her time to answer, as if the words traveled from a distant place. "Happy," she said weakly. Leonardo knelt beside her. "Yes, Mom, very happy." Carmen smiled, a genuine smile, the sincerest Leonardo had ever seen. They embraced in the sun, surrounded by flowers and the scent of wet earth. That moment was worth more than stolen millions, surnames, or lost inheritances. It was his true victory. Time passed, with its ups and downs. Some days Carmen remembered more, others she got lost in her own world. But she was never alone, never again abandoned. Leonardo reorganized his life. He delegated responsibilities, left behind empty events, and began building something new, with meaning. He reconnected with friends, supported social causes for abandoned elders, visited nursing homes, and donated without seeking recognition. And above all, he created new memories with his mother. Afternoons watching movies, walks in the garden, impromptu breakfasts with burnt pancakes. All of it was pure gold. One day, while walking, Carmen squeezed his hand and said tenderly, "My boy." Leonardo smiled, feeling that despite everything, he had achieved what many never do, to recover his true family and with it, his place in the world. This story reminds us that, although the past may be full of secrets, betrayals, and pain, true strength lies in love and in the roots we choose to nurture. Leonardo teaches us that family is not always who we think it is, but those who hold us up when we need it most. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more tales that inspire, move us, and invite reflection on life, forgiveness, and justice.